Deport if your department is ongoing asylum you are violating the law. Is that correct? You are violating the law. Is that correct?
When they allowed greatly violated when they allowed
I'm asking you.
Asylum applicants.
Why are you filibustering? Why can't you answer the question? It's a simple question. Why can't you answer the question? It's a simple question. If your department with an ongoing asylum application, you are violating the law. Isn't that correct? You are violating the law. Isn't that correct? Chairman, I will reclaim my time. She's not answering the question. Chairman, I will reclaim my time. She's not answering the question. The obvious answer is that, yes, the obvious answer is that you follow a lawful pathway. If asylum is a lawful pathway, if you have an open asylum pathway, if you have an open asylum case lawfully. But the problem that we are seeing around the country, are not following the law. Is that you don't tell us to change the law. If you don't like the asylum system, don't tell us to change the law. You change the asylum system. Bring it to us. We'll work with you. I think it needs to be changed. Bring it to us. But you can't. I think it needs to be changed. But you can't not going to follow the law. That you're not going to follow the law and deport people who have ongoing applications. Unfortunately, that is exactly what's happening. It's happening across the street from my office right in New York City. Numerous thousands of people who have come to court appearances, exactly what's happening, have left it's happening across the street from my office right in New York City, have been arrested. And then they've been shipped off, and many deported. Of people who have come to court appearances, applicant was ripped away from his wife's asylum application after such a court appearance, been arrested. And then this happened to his wife. They've been shipped off and many deported. In September, one applicant was ripped away from his wife and small children after such a court appearance. And then this happened to his wife. Please play the video. All right, it's not this video. Here it is. No, it's not. It's not this video. All right, it's not this video. All right, it's not this video. Here it is. Now, after this incident, your department issued a statement that said the officer's conduct in this video is unacceptable and beneath the men and women of ICE. After this incident, your department issued a statement that said the officer's conduct in this video is unacceptable and beneath the men and women of ICE. As we conduct a full investigation, our ICE law enforcement are held to the highest professional standards. You reinstated this officer is being relieved of current duties. I sent you a letter and asked a full investigation. What investigation was done? 3 days later, and why was he reinstated? That officer. You did not answer that letter. So I'm going to give you an opportunity and ask you what investigation was done, that if that officer's conduct was, quote, beneath the men and women of ICE, unquote. So I'm going to give you an opportunity right here to explain to me that if that officer's conduct was, quote, beneath the men and women of ICE, unquote, why did you reinstate him? Well, I wrote you 2 months ago. Why haven't you given it to me yet?
I'm actually surprised that you haven't gotten it. I'm going to ask my staff about that.
Well, you shouldn't be surprised because generally, I wrote you 2 months ago. Why haven't you given it to me yet? Now, the other problem that we are seeing all over the country, well, you shouldn't be surprised because officers are wearing masks, not dressed in plain clothes. Now, the other problem that we are seeing all over I'm not asking a question. Is that your officers are wearing masks, dressed in plain clothes, to stop this? We now have 113 going around without identification, so that they will not be masked and that they will identify themselves. Now, you say all of them are identifying themselves. We now have 113 That is not the case because last month, not in New York City again, that they will identify themselves. Now, you say all of them are identifying themselves. Were injured by your masked, because last month, ICE officers, after they New York City again, from 911, by 911, the NYPD officers were injured by your masked, plainclothes individuals after they out of their vehicles and chasing them down 911 by 911. I also asked you what happened there.
Democrats like to show clip after clip. I represent a district that's half of the southern border. Executing. So thank you. I have one question, but I'm going to try to get under Joe Biden. And now we have our lives back. I think it'd be important for the American people to get an update on the policies that you are executing. In the Venezuela I have one question, but I'm going to try to. But first, I'd like to thank once again. I think it'd be important for the American people to get an update on the role Coast Guard played. Thank you for keeping our nation's critical infrastructure safe. First, I'd like to thank our nation's thank you for being here. And so I'd like to the Coast Guard. Thank you during our thank you for keeping our nation's critical infrastructure safe. You saved lives. You are nation's thank you to the Coast Guard for all the work that they've done. And thank you to the Coast Guard. They've been during our Texas floods in the Southcom AOR Coast Guard for a long time. You saved lives. Thank you to the Coast Guard for all the work that they've done. Thank you HSI for leading these anti-gang task force. They work. They're going out there, you're apprehending murderers, you're apprehending sexual offenders, you're doing it in a local, state, federal way. They're working. Thank you for that. Thank you, ICE. Thank you for keeping us safe by deporting all these people. I really appreciate the innovative idea of DHS owning its own airplanes. It's ridiculous that we had to essentially contract out in order to have these repatriation flights. That is a game changer. Thank you for that. Thank you, ERO, for adding bed space. This is exactly how we continue to deport the millions of convicted criminal aliens that are in this country. Thank you, NCTC, for keeping us safe. You're exactly right. We thank you for vetting, for going out and finally doing the role of vetting these people. You and I served overseas. Many of us did, and we know oftentimes it was more dangerous at the chow hall than outside the wire, right? So thank you for that vetting. Thank you, Border Patrol, for ending catch and release. Thank you, TSA, for keeping us safe during all our travel, and then also looking into any future vulnerabilities. Thank you, Secret Service. Thank you for not only keeping our leaders safe, but a lot of people don't realize Secret Service is key to school safety. I think that's just so important. That brings us all together. I wanted to say I want to use the bulk of my time to just thank you, because we don't do that enough here. It's always finger pointing. It's always somebody else's fault. Please go back to your agencies and thank the men and women that are serving every day and helping to keep this country safe. With that, I'd like to give you a little
Stop taking meeting notes and let ClickUp AI Note Taker do it for you. It allows you to focus on your meetings, not your notes. It captures everything, from action items to key decisions. And after every call, you get a clear summary. But where it really goes to the next level is that it's the only AI note taker that connects your meetings to the rest of your work. So stop stressing about taking notes and get the AI note taker that works for you. Get ClickUp AI Note Taker for your next meeting.
You met with heads of state, El Salvador, Mexico, a couple that come to mind. But I just want to thank you and for making our backyard a priority, and ultimately to keep Americans safe. Texans are more safe today than we were a year ago. And a lot of that is due to President Trump and due to the leadership that I'm seeing right here of executing those policies. Thank you, thank you, thank you. With that, Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Ramirez, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Chairman.
American citizens have been arrested or detained. We focus on those that are here illegally.
Secretary Noem, you lie and you lied to the American people. I will be including into the record an article by ProPublica from October 16, 2025, entitled, "We found that more than 170 U.S. citizens have been held by immigration agents. They've been kicked." There's nothing smiling about U.S. citizens. I'm sorry, that's very inappropriate. Let me continue. They've been kicked, dragged, and detained for days. The next one.
The Trump administration has specifically targeted the worst of the worst. The individuals that we are going after are those that are violent criminals, those that are breaking our laws.
Secretary Noem, again, you lied to the American people. I will be including into the record an article by the NBC News from December 7, 2025, entitled, "ICE has arrested nearly 75,000 people with no criminal records, data shows." a co-equal branch of government, and it is your obligation as a member of the executive branch to honor decisions made by the highest court of the land. Yes or no, Secretary?
We are
Yes.
abiding by all federal judges' orders, absolutely.
The Justice Department said that when the administration was ordered back in March to stop sending detained migrants to a mega prison in El Salvador, you personally made the final call to continue the flights anyway. Is that correct?
And the decisions that are made on deportations, where flights go and when they go, are my decision at the Department of Homeland Security. And we'll continue to do the right thing, continue to work and protect Americans, no matter what radical judge comes out and tries to stop us. We'll do.
You lied on the record, and you lied to members of this committee. You violated court orders by not turning around deportation flights bound for El Salvador, where we know that hundreds of people under your leadership have reported that they were raped, they were beaten, and they nearly died. And your agents used chemical weapons in Chicago despite court orders from District Court Judge Ellis forbidding their use. Secretary Noem, you, Gregory Bovino, and your ICBP and DHS deputized agents have waged an unaccountable, unlawful, unconstitutional war against communities across the nation. Our residents have been surveilled, they've been threatened, they've been tear gassed, they've been hit with pepper balls, they've been shot, they've been subjected to warrantless arrest and precision immobilization maneuvers, they've been kidnapped and disappeared under your leadership. So we have a lot to talk about, but you and your department continue to reject congressional oversight. And you know how I know this? I know this because I've requested a meeting with ICE Field Office Director Russell Hutt. I requested a meeting with Field Office Director Samuel Olson. And when you came to Chicago on October 3rd, I publicly and formally requested a meeting with you. So I'm going to be including a letter I sent on October 3rd requesting a meeting with Secretary Noem. So, Secretary Noem, I want to ask you again, will you commit to meet with me, yes or no?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have a lot to talk about, and actually my scheduler has a couple dates that I'll get to you after this meeting. I appreciate that. So look, I want to be very clear. You have misused resources appropriated by Congress. You've engaged in unethical behavior. You have repeatedly made false and misleading statements to Congress and to the press, and you've undermined the separation of powers and disregarded the role of Congress and the courts. Bottom line, you lie with impunity. You reject checks and balances, and you ignore Congress and the courts. Your options are limited. Either you're going to resign, Trump's going to fire you, or you will be impeached. I've already called for your resignation. You may remember I hand-delivered my request to you back in May, and I urge you to reconsider resignation because I've taken the first step towards your impeachment, and I've called on the Judiciary Committee to open an investigation into your lawlessness. Mr. Chairman, I know that at the end we'll be entering a number of articles into consent, but since I have a few moments, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter calling the Judiciary Committee to investigate Secretary Noem's impeachable offenses. Whatever you choose, the American people will have justice, Secretary, and you will be held accountable. I'm going to make sure of that every single day. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Luttrell, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Secretary. It's good to see you, and thank you again for coming to Texas after the Kerrville floods. Your team was amazing. Their interaction with the leadership in our state, up and down the chain of command, was outstanding. Not something I read about. I saw it. So I'm speaking from the truth. So let's talk about worldwide threats, if you don't mind. This may go back and forth to Mr. Glasheen and Mr. Kent. My questions, first and foremost, is the nefarious actors globally, they're kind of everywhere. And as we try to protect the motherland in the cyberspace, air, sea, and land, something's come to my attention in the committee hearing we had earlier, undersea cabling. And I don't know if you're a subject matter expert on this. I really wasn't until this hearing. But a large amount of our information flows under the water, something that most people aren't aware of, but I can assure you that the bad actors globally probably are. Now, it's multi-jurisdictional from what I understand. It's Department of Justice, it's Department of War, and then it's Department of Homeland Security. And they kind of juggle these, kind of juggle the effort. Can you give me some insight on the protection mechanism that Homeland Security has for our undersea cabling? And I consider this a very viable threat specifically for information flow, considering everything that goes back and forth across the water. Can you give me a kind of a high-level briefing considering the atmosphere of what we're looking at?
Yes, I can, and I'll try to leave some time for the other individuals too, but the Department of Homeland Security has 23 different components. Several of them have some responsibility for surveillance and monitoring of those cables and the information that flows through them. So CISA is our cybersecurity agency, which looks for bad actors, hunts down those bad actors, and then hardens our systems. So where we see a weakness or a
If you walked into a company and asked where their IP assets are stored, no one could point to a shelf or cabinet. These invisible resources don't look like assets, yet they control your entire digital footprint. Maybe that's why they're overlooked. But invisibility doesn't mean insignificance. And as the internet grows more complex, the organizations that treat IPs like critical infrastructure will outpace the ones that treat them like temporary tools. So the question is, are we ready to rethink how we value the foundations of the internet? Join NRS. Be empowered to own and protect your digital identity.
There's redundancy on the cabling system, and there's from what I understand, there's over 1 million miles of cable underwater. I want to make sure that we have enough protection in place so the ripple effect is not catastrophic to the country. Mr. Kent, you got something to add? I was going to shift over to Mr. Glasheen.
In terms of undersea cabling, no, I do not.
Okay. Mr. Glasheen, I have a question for you. So as far as trafficking, human trafficking, drug trafficking, this always hurts me to say this, but Houston, Texas is in my district, and it is the worst city in the country for sex trafficking in the country. I just cannot believe that. What is the FBI doing amongst other agencies? You just happen to be sitting here in front of me. And Madam Secretary, you can probably jump in on this too. Enough's enough. I understand the complexities of the World Wide Web and how these bastards are doing this, and we can't seem to grab a hold of them. What's the answer?
Our HSI investigators specialize in child trafficking and human trafficking. They get up every single day and hunt down those individuals that victimize our children and partner with nonprofits and other agencies with the FBI to do that. Yes, it's shocking to me that Houston is one of the hotbeds as well.
We need to take a better look at this because we're losing. I mean, we're losing so bad, I don't even know how to define it. And this has been happening. I said this exact same thing to Mr. Mayorkas, and if I was here before that, I'd say the same thing again. It's just, we have not figured it out. Mr. Glasheen, you got anything for that?
Yeah, I would tell you, it's been a priority with this director. And, you know, so far this year, compared to last year, we have 300 plus human traffickers arrested, up 15%.
I'm sorry, sir. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I appreciate that, and
I'll catch you after class.
If one of the following witnesses wants to give him some time to answer that very important question, they can do that. Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Kennedy, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Noem, with about a year as DHS Secretary under your belt, there's no shortage of criticisms for me to choose from today. You've deported American citizens, bringing a level of inhumanity to this nation's immigration laws that I haven't seen in my lifetime. You've terrorized communities, including my own in Buffalo, New York, vowing to go after the worst of the worst, but instead detaining women, children, and hardworking individuals in pursuit of the American dream. You've botched a response to one of the most devastating floods we've seen, an extreme weather event along the Guadalupe River that took more than 130 innocent lives, including more than 35 children. Central Texas waited days for your agency to respond because of the reckless policies you've implemented. Your FEMA lead was missing in action, completely unreachable, as were FEMA's call lines, with 84% of calls unanswered on July 7th, 3 days after the floods. FEMA personnel, despite your slashing of their ranks, who were ready and willing to help, waited days to spring into action because of your policies. Disasters do not wait for bureaucracy. Your abysmal performance goes beyond your woeful disaster response. You've also taken a sledgehammer to FEMA's recovery, preparedness, and mitigation missions. You canceled more than $4 billion in building resilient infrastructure in communities funds, a program that helps communities reduce their risk of natural disasters. You withheld millions in FEMA funds for emergency alerting infrastructure found to be in violation of the Impound Control Act. You, perhaps most critical to my state of New York, canceled more than 90% of New York State's Homeland Security Program funding, including $134 million in urban area security initiative funds for New York City's greater metropolitan areas. You have mismanaged these grants to the point where cities and states, including New York, are suing you to recover counterterrorism funding that's lawfully theirs and that Congress intended for them to receive. It's a tragedy that we're here today discussing these cuts to counterterrorism and security grant funds for a city that was the main site of the September 11th attacks, the entire reason your department was established in the first place. As the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Emergency Management, it's my responsibility to show the American public how you've systemically upended FEMA and emergency preparedness as we know it. So I have a couple of questions. Simple yes or no answer will suffice. Would you agree with the national security officials' assessment that the United States has been operating in a heightened threat environment for several years now?
Yes.
Yes or no? Would you say New York City is susceptible to these kinds of security threats?
Yes, and that's why they should spend
so with New York City being the number one terrorist target in the nation,
the federal government gave them
with New York City being the number one, I reclaim my time, with New York City being the number one security threat in this nation, it's unconscionable that you would cut $134 million in urban area security initiative funding for the city of New York. What compelled you to knowingly make our cities less safe with these funding cuts?
What compels you, your mayor, and your governor to release thousands of criminals on the streets rather than to turn them over to ICE? You'd rather release a murderer out onto your street,
you cut $134 million
and honor our detainers.
in funds to support the security of New York City and the state of New York, the number one threat in this nation. In your own words, your cuts are blatantly political, callous, and outright dangerous. It's clear you have no interest in countering real threats in the homeland. While high-risk cities and disaster zones wait for help, you've devoted the past 11 months of violent raids, anti-police policies, and nonstop photo ops. You've brought shame to a department that was created after 9/11 in a time of unity to protect our people. Your failure to lead is a direct threat to the homeland security in our nation, and you should resign immediately. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Strong, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ranking member, and members of this committee. I thank you, too, to our witnesses for being here today, for your work to protect the homeland in an increasingly complex threat environment. My question today focuses specifically on the evolving drone threat. Mr. Glasheen, the FBI's National Counter UAS Training Center at Redstone Arsenal is now the central hub for preparing federal, state, and local partners for drone threats at major events. What makes Redstone Arsenal such an effective location for this mission, and how does that setting support the scale of training required for World Cup, America 250, and the 2028 Olympics?
Thank you for your question, Congressman. What makes Redstone a great partner for us is, one, the support that we have from Congress. Number two, the space we have there. The FBI has been in Huntsville for a long time. Huntsville also houses our Special Agent Bomb Technician Program, where we train bomb technicians, EOD professionals across the United States. And we
Garnier Super UV Cooling Sunscreen, a light, refreshing texture for 8 hours of freshness.
mirror in that process to train the counter-UAS operators.
Thank you. I was there for the inaugural graduation. I'm telling you, it was most impressive. I can assure you there's no other location in the country that offers the same mix of controlled airspace, testing ranges, partnered agencies, and mission infrastructure that the FBI has at Redstone Arsenal. Counter-UAS has the ability in Huntsville to jam, block, drop, intercept, and do forensics. As demand for this specialized training grows, what investment should Congress prioritize to ensure long-term stability for this mission at Redstone?
I'd say yesterday, or the legislation in front of, I think, the Senate right now for the NDA, for the authorities, that'd be the first step to give us the ability to lawfully use the counter-UAS authorities. I think additionally, is just like the computer technology, it evolves, with the months. And so the counter-UAS technology is going to change, so have the appropriate funding and support to stay up with that technology so we can mitigate the threats that our nation faces.
Thank you. Those graduates were from all over the country, and it was most impressive. Secretary Noem, this committee has failed to thank you for your faithful service to America. The southern border is closed. Human smugglers, drug traffickers, and illegal aliens that invaded this country from more than 160 different countries are being returned to the country of their origin. Fentanyl poisonings are down more than 35%. Secretary Noem, thank you for your efforts to keep these drugs out of our country in an effort to save a generation of Americans. It's not a Republican issue. It's not a Democratic issue. It's an American issue. And I thank you. Secretary Noem, many of the most advanced counter unmanned aerial systems technologies are being tested and evaluated in North Alabama. How is DHS ensuring that those capabilities transition quickly into field use, particularly ahead of these major events? And what more can Congress do to accelerate the pipeline?
No, we appreciate the authorities that are necessary for us to operate, and standing up a drone program and counter drone program is one of the top 3 priorities of the department this next year to meet the threats that we face every day. Every day, our Secret Service, our Coast Guard, our Border Patrol are seeing drones used against them. Criminals using them to surveil them, to find out law enforcement operations, and to leak them, and to put their lives in danger. So making sure that we have the ability to operate and to see far into the future and over our operations is important, but we also need the opportunity to take them down when necessary. We've seen the cartels using weaponized drones against each other. We know it's only a matter of time before we see that here on the homeland. My job is to make sure that we're prepared and that we're equipped, and to advocate to you for the authorities that we need to make that happen.
Thank you. With the new counter-UAS authorities expected to be enacted as part of the National Defense Authorization Act, the next challenge is execution. What concrete steps is DHS planning to take in the coming months to ensure that these new authorities are fully operational before the FIFA World Cup, the Olympics, and America 250? And I even want to take it even further. You start looking at college football, we've got to take it even further rather than they're all large gathering events. I actually had the Secretary of Security of the Southeastern Conference before Mr. Kennedy and my committee, and it was unbelievable. On any given weekend, 8 to 10 football stadiums with greater than 90,000 people there. We must defend the home front. And I'm sorry that my time has expired, but I thank you for being before this committee today.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize the gentlelady from New Jersey, Ms. McIver, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for holding this hearing today. The greatest threat to the homeland right now is a Department of Homeland Security that the American people no longer trust, a department actively undermined by its own secretary. This is on you, Secretary Noem. Today's hearing is supposed to be about worldwide threats, but Madam Secretary, under your watch, the threat is coming from inside the building. Because when DHS, the department charged with keeping Americans safe, is caught breaking the law, lying to the American public, systematically dismantling oversight, fueling bigotry, and targeting vulnerable communities, trust is broken. Let's start with the basics. How can we trust your department with you at the helm? The American people deserve an answer, even if you've spent the past year dodging accountability like it's your full-time job. We need to talk about oversight. Oversight is not optional. It is not a courtesy because you feel like it. It is not something you entertain only when it's politically convenient to you. Yet, time and time again, Secretary Noem, you have treated congressional oversight as an inconvenience at best, and at worst, something to be invaded, ignored, or denied altogether. Republicans on this committee may be willing to hand over their constitutional duty in order to kiss this administration's butt cheeks, but I am not. I will never. My district is not, and the American people sure aren't. While Republicans turned this hearing into a praise fest for your failed 10-year communities across America, including mine in New Jersey, are made less safe because DHS under your leadership has become unproductive and malicious. All of the thank you that we keep hearing from across the aisle, there's no thank you from me. And we see the truth that you're trying to hide. The truth is you are deeply unqualified for the post you hold. This is on full display in the way you treat the people in this body, myself included, who have been elected to serve our communities and keep them safe. Representative Grajava, Senator Padilla, myself and others whose character, integrity, and bodies were attacked by your department without evidence and without apology. Far beyond being disrespectful, you have shown a complete disregard for the oversight authority granted to us by law. You have repeatedly shown that you will target whoever you want, whenever you want, without accountability. Members of Congress, members of our communities, and even American citizens, as many of my colleagues have continued to point out today. Secretary Noem, that's not leadership. That's not democracy. And that is not how this works. Again, this is not just about you. Don't want you to think this is just a pick on you day. This is about the Trump administration that has turned DHS into a political weapon. So I'll ask you this. Is Trump embarrassed by your tenure, or is this exactly the kind of god-awful leadership he wants at DHS? Yes or no?
Ma'am, we've already conducted more oversight visits.
No, it's a yes or no. Yes or no. Okay, Secretary Noem, this is my time to talk, not your time to talk. I reclaim my time. I reclaim my time. I reclaim my time. Chair, I reclaim my time. Secretary Noem, DHS is breaking the law, hiding information from Congress, and shutting out oversight. So let me ask you, how can the American people trust your department with you at the helm with this kind of behavior?
The American people absolutely trust this department to keep them safe. And we are showing that every day by the support we get across the country, the amount of people that we're recruiting to all of our different agencies.
Thank you, Secretary Noem. Do you agree that using DHS resources to target members of Congress is an abuse of power?
Excuse me, would you say that
You would have heard me if you stopped talking and listened to my questions. Do you agree that using DHS resources to target members of Congress is an abuse of power?
We are not doing that. We are out there enforcing the law, doing our work, and we are allowing oversight.
Of course, we're not going to get any answers. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. McKeen, for 5 minutes of questions.
It's no wonder that chaos has become the commonplace when rudeness is so on display. Look, it's both sides. We've created a lack of civility in this country, but we're perpetuating in this society what your administration is trying to correct, and that is returning back to the rule of law. What separates us from falling into chaos as a nation where poverty envelops us is when we return to order and a display of respect towards law enforcement, a display of respect to officials. This custom, and you've been a member of Congress, of where we talk over people and we don't give secretaries a chance to respond, the height of self-importance that too many people try to employ in this building, not remembering we're all here as public servants to serve the people. We lift our hearts up far beyond our fellow countrymen. I'll tell you who says thank you. It's those whose families that were the victim of assaults and rapes and murders under the auto pen period the last 4 years. They say thank you. Those who see the madness of lawlessness, a lack of respect to law enforcement, the heightened element of law enforcement sitting in their vehicles and being targeted, say thank you. Those families of law enforcement whose addresses are being put out in public so they can intimidate not only the law enforcement officials, but their families to try to put them into a place of fear, say thank you for common sense returning back into this country. If we do not have a respect of authority, a respect of law enforcement, thank you for allowing arrests to happen when someone spits at law enforcement. Thank you. FEMA, you were assaulted a minute ago verbally over what you're doing with FEMA. I will tell you, as somebody that comes from a state that has more tornadoes, Oklahoma, than probably any other state, thank you for looking at how we can save money through efficiencies. Our state would love the opportunity of what this administration is talking about, of returning power and decision-making back to states. As I've said to you before, of a person who sat on a bulldozer watching the madness of trying to comply with EPA regs that have built their way into FEMA and people's homes destroyed, and as a state lawmaker pushing timber around on a dozer trying to comply and get taking the time off from time of exercise as a lawmaker trying to help people. And I saw the craziness of federal regulations. Thank you for looking and not taking your foot off the gas of trying to put more money back into national security from the waste that has happened through endless regs. All right, now I'm going to get to a question, Secretary.
Could I say something about FEMA?
Absolutely, you can. Thank you.
The only grants that weren't funded, the individual ones that you were talking about, mitigation ahead, were ones that were weaponized to fund the Green New Deal and for climate change. And those were redirected to true mitigation efforts. FEMA today is deploying resources 2 times faster on average than in history, which means the dollars are going out twice as fast than they ever have before. And the president, as soon as these disasters are happening, is deploying those resources to Republican and Democrat states. New Mexico, Texas, Alaska, they're all getting dollars immediately, and we're responding immediately to our people. I have to actually leave this hearing early because the FEMA Review Council is giving their report today on suggestions for changes to FEMA.
Thank you for not taking your foot off the gas on that.
I have to co-chair it, but I will be leaving soon to have to go do that. But those suggestions are Republicans and Democrats coming forward with how FEMA should go forward in the future based on the president's vision for making sure that states get the chance to manage it and that local emergency managers get the chance to go and help their communities in a much more efficient way.
Take those monies and let's move them to true national security through waste and inefficiencies. Where we've deployed money for snow movement. We have deployed money previously to move snow that melts. Okay, I want to just throw this open to you and Director Kent, whoever wants to take this. We have to find a balance between making sure the First Amendment is preserved at all costs, but also protecting law enforcement. The social media heightened of a hearing that the chairman held last week, great hearing. How do we preserve, what ideas can we continue with to where the online enticement threats causing people to want to embolden themselves to then go act upon those threats that we see in social media. They say the magic words. They know it's not going to get them because they don't do a direct threat, but it's an indirect threat. It's always trying to accomplish the same purpose. How do we preserve the First Amendment? This is a lawmaking exercise and why we hold these hearings, not for show. How do we preserve the First Amendment and stop the insanity of these indirect threats that are going after your law enforcement officials?
I apologize. The gentleman's time has expired. I know the Secretary has to leave, and I would now recognize a gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Johnson, for 5 minutes of questions.
I'm just going to take the position that she was scared of my questions. Mr. Chairman, if we could stop the clock and
Oh, yes,
wait
no,
till after all
absolutely.
this.
The clerk will suspend.
If we could reset the time,
Yes.
that would be helpful.
We'll reset the clock. Gentlelady, prepared.
Okay. Thank you.
Is recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to respond to a lot of what Secretary Noem has just testified to. And gentlemen, I have some comments that I hope you'll take back to the Secretary and to the Department. If there's anything that is clear about what is going on in this country, is that the rhetoric and fear that is happening is at an all-time escalated high, and we're all describing different aspects of it. Fear of law enforcement, fear of citizens, fear of people who are legally in this country, because it's the rhetoric that is happening from the very top that is being decimated down level, and that is really, really dangerous. And one of the things that the Secretary said was she is restoring the rule of law. That is absolutely not true, because the rule of law is founded on two fundamental principles: that if you are going to be subject to a criminal arrest in this country, that there is probable cause to do so. You can't just snatch somebody walking into a coffee shop because of the color of their skin. There's no probable cause for that. And also that you will get due process. And that is not happening. And so what you're seeing is an overwhelming frustration of the American people in this country, that the lack of respect and regard for the rule of law by this administration, and in particular by this secretary, is at a level that we have never seen and violates all of the constitutional norms and all of the principles of legal fairness in this country. And you're seeing that manifest itself in threats to law enforcement and bubbling over, because people are frustrated, and they are channeling that frustration because the administration is not listening and is only doubling down on the rhetoric. You know, this notion that I think my colleagues highlighted, that we're only going to pursue serious threats, is just not true. I visited an ICE facility outside of Dallas, and over 70% of them were classified as the lowest threat level, as never having a criminal record at all. But yet they were there because of the color of their skin. There was not a probable cause. They're not a threat to this country. They have no criminal history at all. I fully support, as does everyone on this committee, Homeland Security focusing on threats to our national security. We want cybersecurity. We want terroristic threats from abroad to be stopped. Absolutely. None of us want a recreation of 9/11, but we also do not want, under any level, the trampling of our constitutional rights and the legal system of due process. I have a poster here to highlight 3 American citizens that were arrested by ICE who had done nothing wrong. They presented themselves as American citizens, but yet were still trampled, assault. One had broken ribs, a brain injury, an older gentleman by being knocked down to the ground after he said, "I'm an American citizen." But yet they did not stop. And that is a huge problem. When somebody says, "I'm an American citizen," to ICE, and ICE does not stop and continues to assault them and physically berate them and then hold them for days and days on end without a due process hearing, that is a problem. And it is not stopping. We have brought these concerns to the Secretary and to agencies like yourself in these hearings time and time again through multiple letters. We've all written letters that have gone unresponded, because this cannot happen in our country. And the reality of it is, in any law enforcement situation, and what we have happening out into the public, is there are ICE agents and there are Border Patrol agents that are doing their great job. They're doing what they're supposed to do. But there are also bad actors. There are people who are exceeding their authority. The power's gone to their head. The intimidation is outrageous. And there's no effort to rein them in by the FBI. There's no effort to rein them in by the Homeland Security. There's no effort to overcorrect, just like one of my colleagues highlighted, the reinstatement of one that was inappropriate. And these efforts are breaking down the trust of the American people. I hope you take these concerns back because they need to be addressed if we're going to address the violence in this country. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Creighton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this committee hearing today. Thank you for the witnesses. Director Kent, you talked about what keeps you up at night. I believe you said, we don't know who came into the country in the last 4 years. And we've cited several times in this hearing that about 15 to 20 million people came into this country under the last administration. And something that you said actually shocked me. You said that 18,000 known and suspected terrorists entered into the country during the Biden administration. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's deeply concerning, but I'm really not surprised. Many of us in this committee said that's exactly what was going to happen. I didn't know that those numbers would be as high as they are. One of the other things that really concerns me about what's going on in this country is we continue to let people into this country that do not want to assimilate to our culture and want to harm Americans. I want to go ahead and play a video.
Law should be above the U.S. Constitution.
Yes.
Should Sharia law be over the U.S. Constitution?
Yes.
U.S. Constitution, which is made by people, and the Sharia law is made by Allah. So that is all the way above. That has to be definitely in the land, not for the America, for the whole world, would be above.
So that should be above the U.S. Constitution?
Yes.
Do you feel more comfortable living under American law, or do you feel more comfortable living under Sharia law?
Sharia law. I'm a Muslim. I prefer Sharia law. Sharia law, yes.
You prefer Sharia law over American law?
Of course, yeah.
They always can come with the same accusations. This speaker supports death penalty for homosexuals. This speaker supports death penalty for this crime or that he is homophobic. These are general views that every Muslim actually has. Every Muslim believes in these things.
If the law of the land is Islamic, we will respect the law of the land.
What if it's not Islamic?
If it's not Islamic, then the law of the land and those who make it can go to hell, quite honestly, because Allah said in the Quran, in chapter 33, verse 1, He said, O Prophet, fear Allah and do not obey the disbelievers and the hypocrites.
You know why they're worried about the border? Watch this clip here that Vinny just sent with Al-Qaeda. I call upon every Muslim and the infidel, criminal, and arrogant United States. Does not matter if they're Arab, American, or other descent. I'm saying to all of them, revenge, revenge. Do not consult anyone about killing infidel Americans. You should have a lot of determination, and a list of your targets should be effective.
Director Kent, what do you think when you see a video like that?
I think we didn't have control of our borders, and we don't know who's come into our country. However, we have had around 2.7 million individuals from Muslim countries and Muslim regions who came in under the Biden administration, who went through minimal to no vetting whatsoever, who probably share values like the folks that you saw on the screen.
Director Kent, are you aware that when we invite people into this country and they become citizens, they swear an oath to defend and support the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America and against all enemies, foreign and domestic?
Yes.
What do you believe the long-term consequences will be if the United States continues admitting individuals who either openly reject assimilation into American civic culture or who falsely swear an oath to uphold the Constitution despite having no intention of honoring it?
We simply won't have a country anymore as we know it. I think we can look to Europe and to the UK to see exactly where this leads.
I agree 100%. Director Kent, are you aware of some of the differences between U.S. Constitution and common law interpretations of the Sharia law?
I am broadly, yeah.
What are the differences in your opinion, and I know you're not a doctorate on this subject, but between the First Amendment, which guarantees freedom of speech and the press, including the right to criticize religions, religious texts, and public figures without government punishment?
Yeah, the freedom of speech, I think, is huge because you don't have that under Sharia law, and you also don't have the assumption of innocence under Sharia law as we do.
Many interpretations of Sharia Blasphemy, criticism of the Quran or the Prophet Muhammad can be a serious offense, sometimes punishable by death. And there are many others that I don't have time to get to, but I wanted to bring that up today so that Americans understand the differences and why we need to be very careful about who we let into this country. I thank you guys for the work you do. I thank you for those underneath you working so hard to keep the American citizens and people safe. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and I remind if you don't get to questions that you want to ask, you can submit them for the record, so we can do that at the end. I now recognize the gentleman from Puerto Rico, Mr. Hernandez, for 5 minutes of questions.
I have some matters of interest regarding immigration and FEMA, but before that, Mr. Kent, does the Bible say anything about freedom of speech?
Not a biblical scholar.
I don't think it does, and I am concerned about singling out Muslims and specific religions to talk about how their religious dogma conflicts with our laws and constitutions. I lament that Ms. Noem has had to leave early today, but I wanted to talk about the atrocities that the DHS's immigration enforcement and the pain it is causing in places like my home district of Puerto Rico. Just a few weeks ago, we witnessed ICE shove a pregnant woman. I cannot imagine, as an expecting father myself, the anxiety that family must have gone through when they took that person to the hospital and treated her for her injuries. Also, a few weeks ago, CBP detained Aracelis Terrero from the streets of Cabo Rojo. They put her on a plane, they sent her to Texas. She was in a detention facility. She was removed from the detainee location service, and she was not allowed to contact her attorney. Ms. Terrero was a domestic violence victim who was in Puerto Rico with a legal work permit. And I wanted to ask Ms. Noem if DHS policies allow CBP agents to detain persons who are legally in the United States. I wanted to ask Ms. Noem the legal authority behind the detention of Aracelis Terrero. I wanted to ask Ms. Noem why she was removed from the detainee location system. I wanted to ask Ms. Noem why Aracelis Terrero was not allowed to contact her attorney. Unfortunately, I predict that she would not have given us adequate answers based on the answers that she has provided to my colleagues here today. Now, I also wanted to raise a concern with Ms. Noem regarding TSA agents. In Puerto Rico, I witnessed how many TSA agents worked arduously without pay during the government shutdown, and how her announcement that they would get $10,000 as a bonus for working without pay during the pandemic actually created the opposite effect of boosting morale, because it was so selective that it excluded, apparently, most workers. And finally, I wanted to raise the concerns of red and blue mayors from Puerto Rico. I emphasize red and blue mayors, Republican and Democratic mayors, regarding her recent secret policy regarding transactions or grants for FEMA money that exceed $100,000. So to their surprise, they found out that grants and funding assignments exceeding $100,000 would now need to be approved by Secretary Noem. But there was no transparency regarding that rule. And we have no information regarding the application and the enforcement of that rule. And I sent her a letter with 15 other members asking those questions, and I got a letter in response that has no answers to these questions. And I wanted to urge her to reconsider this policy that is delaying aid and reconstruction funds for the people of Puerto Rico, which are still suffering 9 years after Hurricane Maria, and that this is affecting Republicans and Democrats, that reconstruction should not have a party ID, and that instead of fighting the bureaucracy, this has made the bureaucracy worse. But unfortunately, Secretary Noem left early, and we are left expecting these answers. Thank you, and with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Ogles, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses. Let's be clear. The United States of America is safer today because of President Trump. The United States of America is the dominant predator across all landscapes because of President Trump. We have restored our status as the global leader because of President Trump. Hard stop. Now, when we look at the topic of the hearings, the objectives. There were 6 bullet points. I'm going to hit the highlights, examine the full scope of evolving threats facing the United States of America, particularly on readiness at the federal, local, and state level. Highlight the significant, number 2, the significant national security gains achieved by President Donald Trump. 3, review the Trump administration's efforts to reverse the damage caused by the Biden border crisis. 4, analyze the scale and scope of cyber threats, which is my area as the chairman of the cyber subcommittee. 5, discuss the evolving terrorism landscape, including FTOs, HVEs, and DVEs. And 6, evaluate emerging unconventional threats. Unfortunately, my colleagues must not have read the memo, because that's not what they've talked about. They want to talk about ICE and immigration. So let's talk about that. You know, in 1965, we passed the Hart-Celler Act. Since that time, we've seen chain migration on a scale that, quite frankly, I'm not sure even the progressive liberal authors of that bill could have possibly imagined. In that amount of time, we've seen 60 million migrants come into this country, most of which, 90%, from third world countries. There are roughly 300,000 Afghans in America, 200,000 of which came under Biden. Approximately 45% of Afghans are on U.S. food stamps. Afghans under the Biden administration have an unemployment rate double that of Americans. 68% of Afghans are on Medicaid. Let's go overseas. And so if that sounds like political rhetoric, let's look at the facts. Paris, 48% of crimes committed by foreigners, most of which were Muslim. Overall crime has surged since the Islamic migrant influx. That is from the French Interior Ministry. London, 40% of sex crimes are committed by foreigners, most of which are Muslims. That's the Metropolitan Police Department. Rome, 83% of 2024 street robberies by non-EU citizens, almost all of which were Muslim. Sexual assaults, 69% Muslim, Italian police reports. Minneapolis, here in the homeland. Violent crime in Cedar Riverside, a Somali hub, rose 56%. 2010 to 2018. Dearborn, Michigan, crime 105% above the national average. Hamtramck, outside of Detroit, 92% of assaults by Muslim immigrants. Drug arrests, 85% Muslim immigrants. Now let's go to Nashville, Tennessee, where a Somali man, a migrant who came in 2015, raped to death a woman on the steps of a church. I've had enough. I've said it once, and I'll say it again. Deport them all. This is our country. We get to decide who comes in, and we get to decide who has to leave. And I say, deport them all. 90% that have come into this country are from third world countries, most of which are sucking resources from American citizens, burdening our cities. They do not belong here. Mr. Kent, I'm chairman of the Cyber Subcommittee. Let's go into the scope and scale of the cyber threats posed by the CCP. I give you the floor, sir.
CCP is probably one of the more aggressive actors in the cyberspace right now. NCTC is mostly focused on the terrorism realm and how terrorist actors are using the proliferation of encrypted devices and just the internet to spread propaganda. That's probably our biggest purview in terms of cyber.
Mr. Glasheen?
Chairman, I would say that the Chinese government, the CCP, is our greatest cyber threat. It is a full-time job. And the resources they throw at this is unbelievable. It's a major concern.
You know, I want to thank the witnesses for being here. And I want to thank President Trump. You know, as I sit in the skiff and I'm reading the briefings from the CIA and the FBI on the daily attacks to our country and to our infrastructure, I appreciate the president and I appreciate you gentlemen and your service to this country in keeping Americans safe. They have no idea what you do every single day. God bless you and God bless America. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentlelady from New Jersey, Ms. Poe, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to our ranking member. Yes, indeed, we've spoken a great deal and learned many things here today, some of which are still going unanswered, many questions that all of us still have. And there are a vast number of threats that endanger our homeland, from increasingly sophisticated state-sponsored terrorist networks to evolving technologies. Our law enforcement agencies are engaging criminals on multiple fronts and facing significant demands every single day. Next year, there will be an increasingly heightened threat environment in my district in northern New Jersey as we host the World Cup. Federal counterterrorism grant funding is absolutely critical in keeping our communities safe against the evolving threat environment. This is why I have been so deeply disturbed by the decision of Secretary Noem to freeze, delay, and cut billions of dollars in federal counterterrorism grant funds. In February, her department, DHS, froze billions of dollars in counterterrorism grants that had already been awarded to states and cities. This decision left state and local public safety organizations unable to access critical funding. DHS then ignored legal deadlines for releasing this year's installment of the $1.5 billion for these counterterrorism programs. And when DHS finally released this funding, she abruptly and illegally slashed funding to states with Democratic governors like New Jersey. States and localities have sued in federal court for funding owed by the federal government that was appropriated for them by Congress. In October, I sent a letter to Secretary Noem, and if she was here, I would be saying this directly to her, signed by all of my Democratic colleagues in New Jersey's delegation, demanding that she stop playing politics with federal counterterrorism funding and immediately restore New Jersey's allocation. Specifically, I'm referring to the 50% cut to New Jersey's allocation of the Homeland Security Grant Program, which includes the Urban Area Security Initiative and the State Homeland Security Program. This is the single largest preparation grant program in the Federal Emergency Management Agency. New Jersey has relied on these federal grants to respond and prepared against terrorist attack. When she published the notice of funding opportunities for the Homeland Security Grant Program, she stated that her intent to allocate this funding was going to be based on statutory risk assessment and an analysis of relative risk to terrorism faced by the 100 most populous areas in the country. Under this process, New Jersey was preliminarily allocated around $19 million, but DHS final award notification, our state received just $9 million. The final award notification failed to explain why such drastic cuts were made. Instead, she simply stated that it was done, quote, per DHS directive. To this day, we have still not received, I have not received a response to my letter. And I absolutely cannot understand and am so incredibly disappointed by the fact that this administration continues to try and attempt to walk all over this body. Congress is Article 1 branch, and we demand that we've received the respect that is due and that she respond to the questions, and that is her responsibility and her job. Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
Gentlelady yields back. I now recognize the gentlelady from South Carolina, Ms. Biggs, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I know you have a really difficult job. I want to take a moment just to highlight the fantastic work of the Homeland Security Advisory Council. I think when I say this, I speak on behalf of our entire South Carolina delegation when I say that I'm pleased to see South Carolina's own Governor Henry McMaster appointed to chair the HSAC. Since its inception in 2002, the Council's mission has been to offer the department real-time advice across the whole spectrum of security issues. And I think this is especially critical for a state like mine in South Carolina, where we face everything from severe weather events such as Hurricane Helene to major port security and cyber security concerns. But I'll move on, and I would like to direct this statement to Director Kent. China is and has been for quite some time the primary great power competitor to the U.S. I think some of my colleagues have already established that today. And I think we've identified the pacing challenge for our national security strategies. Chinese companies have made land acquisitions near sensitive military sites in the U.S., and Chinese researchers have engaged in espionage and intellectual property theft. Chinese national encounters at our northern and southern borders surged in fiscal year 24, and China remains the primary supplier of precursor chemicals contributing to American overdose deaths. So my question, Director, is to what extent do you see a nexus between China's destabilizing activities and the terror threat landscape in the United States?
Thank you for that question, and that's a very important topic, especially in terms of fentanyl and the precursors the Chinese Communist Party provides. Working directly with the cartels, we have agents of the Chinese Communist Party, some directly affiliated and some indirectly affiliated, that are working with the cartels to continue to change essentially the recipe of the fentanyl, because as we designate these different precursors and they kind of fall off the market or become more regulated, these advanced chemists will then come into play, and they're the ones that provide the new ingredients, the new ways to manufacture fentanyl that kills American citizens. So this is something that we're looking at, in particular the relationship between these Chinese actors and the Mexican drug cartels.
Well, thank you so much. And sir, if you have any additional information, I'd be happy to hear.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for the opportunity. I think to your question is, if our country's destabilized, it creates a lot of vulnerabilities for us. And whether it be the fentanyl is what you're talking about here, it could definitely affect our national security. Regarding the fentanyl, one thing Director Patel recently did is we've recognized the challenge that fentanyl faces in the United States. And instead of continuing to address the symptom, look at the root of the problem. He recently went over to China, met with his counterparts in MSP, and they agreed to put 13 precursor chemicals on an export control list. And if we can prevent the chemicals and the precursors coming to the United States or into the, Mexico or anyone that puts together the fentanyl that comes into the United States, that can have a greater effect to reduce that threat to the United States.
Well, thank you so much, and I appreciate you being here and hope you realize how important your work is. And I know the district, my 3rd district of South Carolina, is counting on you to continue that hard work. I yield back, sir.
Gentlelady yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Walkinshaw, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I regret that Secretary Noem tapped out after 2 hours, but nonetheless, I want to focus on an issue that I think is really important: the misuse of taxpayer funds and the steering of DHS funds to politically connected firms tied to the Secretary's office, while hiding that activity from the American people. Secretary Noem has been criticized by members of her own party and by the Trump administration for being slow and ineffective when Americans actually need her help. Republican Senator Tom Tillis said she was, quote, slow off the mark in getting disaster aid out the door. A senior administration official recently told Politico that there was, quote, some fishy stuff going on with money at DHS. And the veto authority she handed to Corey Lewandowski over contracts and grants has delayed life-saving resources after disasters. So when it comes to helping disaster victims, she's been slow and ineffective. But when it came to spending money on her own image and then funneling that money to her friends and her political allies, she moved with remarkable speed. According to reporting by ProPublica, DHS obligated $220 million for an advertising campaign featuring her in staged, phony border imagery and featuring pictures of President Trump's private properties. That money, that taxpayer money, was routed through a newly created and secretive Delaware shell company. It was then secretly funneled from that shell company to a firm with direct political and personal ties to her office and her political operation. That firm is called the Strategy Group. This situation has all of the elements of political corruption. First, she invoked emergency authority to bypass competitive bidding. Second, she concealed the true destination of the money by routing it through a shell company, a red flag in any corruption investigation. Third, the firm that actually did the work, that filmed her attempting to herd cattle, has documented political and personal ties to the secretary and her senior leadership. Fourth, her directive requiring personal approval of all contracts over $100,000 concentrated power in the hands of the very people tied to the firm that secretly received the work, her and Mr. Lewandowski. At the exact time this contract was executed, DHS was diverting investigators and resources away from child exploitation, away from child trafficking, away from illegal gun smuggling, yet somehow she found nearly $250 million to promote herself, and the money flowed to her political allies. A federal contracting law expert quoted in ProPublica summarized it plainly. It's corrupt is the word. That's what I would have liked to ask the secretary about today. I would have asked if she personally approved the money that flowed to her political and personal allies. I would have asked if whether when she was governor of South Dakota in 2023 and the same firm got $8.5 million of taxpayer money, whether she steered the money to them. Because an official in her administration said she did. That's what I would have asked her. But she had to leave early. Mr. Glasheen, are you familiar with the Proud Boys?
I'm familiar with the name, yeah, Proud Boys.
Okay. Does the FBI still designate the Proud Boys as an extremist organization? They did in 2018 in President Trump's first term.
We are in the process right now of changing our categories for domestic terrorists.
So they're no longer designated as an extremist organization. The FBI designated them an extremist organization in 2018. Has that changed?
I'm not aware that they did that.
It's all over the media, sir. It's widely reported. Can you get back to me on that?
Sure will.
All right, thank you.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Knott, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I go into my line of questioning, it's worth notice that the previous administration labeled Catholic churches and charities as domestic terrorists, and there was no outrage about that from the other side of the aisle. But regards to today's hearing, threats that currently face the country, we have millions of people in this country right now who will harm the country either with specific intent or by natural effect. There's a refusal to assimilate. There's a disdain for Western values. There's even a disdain for this country. We've seen it recently in the unfortunate but staggering case that we've become aware of in Minnesota. Somalian groups who have come here to defraud the United States to the tune of billions of dollars, submitting fake invoices, at least motivated in part for personal enrichment, and then to fund terrorist groups back home, our adversaries. And one of the points that I find most disgraceful from the other side of the aisle, they would rather talk about Secretary Noem rather than these threats that we are trying to combat. And they also say that this is strictly a race issue. That's a disgusting accusation. From my experience in law enforcement, there were people from all over the world who exploited the open border policies or weak legal immigration policies to come here, whether they were from Eastern Europe, China, Russia, the Middle East, Northern Africa, Pacific Islands, and of course, South America. It's a full world problem that is operating inside of our borders. So, Mr. Kent, let me just start with you. How can we programmatically identify, again, these threats that arrive at the point of millions of people who are here specifically harming the country?
So right now we're in the triage phase. We've already identified 18,000 individuals who have ties to known suspected terrorists and terrorist organizations. So we're starting with them, working with DHS and the FBI to locate and deport them. But as you pointed out, it is a much bigger problem. We've had 2 to 2.7 million folks from Muslim countries, Muslim regions that have come into the country under Biden with minimum to no vetting.
Well, I asked you the question, how do you vet someone that doesn't come from a functioning country?
Exactly. You simply can't. That's why prior to the Biden administration, these individuals, even ones who wanted to claim asylum, they had to go to the first safe third country. And it would take 18 months to 2 years to properly vet them. Biden threw all of that out the window.
We were assured by Secretary Noem's predecessor that every Afghani refugee who came in under the asylum program was thoroughly vetted. Was that true?
That was a lie. Any of those individuals who were vetted, such as the terrorists in D.C., they were vetted under a war zone standard to see if they could serve as a soldier or as a guard or a cook or something like that, to see if they posed a threat to us tactically in Afghanistan or Iraq, but not to be our neighbors. Two completely different systems of vetting. The Biden administration used the tactical vetting as a ruse to get millions of people into the
And then once they were here, we have eyewitness testimony that they were deployed to military bases and then picked up by people who were already in the country, never to be seen again. Is that consistent with what you've seen in your current position?
Absolutely. We're having a hard time running down where a lot of these individuals are. That's why we haven't been able to locate and deport all of them rapidly.
What tools can we assist you with in identifying these self-radicalizing circles who are inside the country currently? One thing that I want to be sure that the people who are watching this know is that the shooter who committed the act of terrorism against the 2 National Guard members, he was radicalized here. How are we going to identify, again, the people who are inside of our own borders, empowering our enemies to commit harm inside this country?
Right now, the Trump administration has essentially gone back to letting us enforce laws, letting us enforce immigration standards, and letting us vet people. What I would like to emphasize to this committee and to the American people is that we simply cannot go back and retroactively vet these millions of folks that came in under Joe Biden. We have to locate them, and we have to deport them as soon as we possibly can. Those who want to reapply, they can have the opportunity to reapply. So in terms of what we need, we just need the longitude to do our jobs. We're getting that from the Trump administration, and we appreciate the support of this committee.
Yep. Mr. Glasheen, I want to give you a time to answer. In terms of the types of domestic terror that we currently face inside of our own borders, can you briefly describe that with the remaining minute that I have?
Yeah, and thanks for the opportunity. I want to make very clear, I know the question came up earlier about designating the prevalence. The FBI doesn't designate domestic terror groups. We don't do that.
That wasn't a serious line of questions.
We investigate people.
Yes.
And the common component there is violence. So I want to make that very clear. And so in terms of regarding the domestic terrorism threat, we have over 1,700 domestic terrorism investigations in the U.S. And with respect to Antifa, which was asked earlier, we have approximately 70 Antifa investigations. Our arrests with Antifa-related subjects are up 171% this year.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you.
I now recognize gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Carter. 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, witnesses, for being here. I represent the New Orleans region where we welcome partnership. We do not welcome occupation. What we're seeing unfold in our community is not public safety. It's a political stunt wrapped in badges, armored vehicles, and military uniforms. ICE and Border Patrol agents have descended into our community with no transparency and no meaningful coordination with local officials. The militarized forces who are not trained in our local laws, not trained in community-based de-escalation, and do not know our neighborhoods or our people. This is a recipe for disaster, confusion, and dangerous mistakes. Our communities are not a stage for political theater. If this administration wants to partner, then act like it. Share the plan, respect local law, and work with us, not around us. Unfortunately, Kristi Noem, our secretary, had to leave in the middle of a very important conversation to go and talk about dismantling FEMA, a discussion we'll have at another time that for the life of me, I simply can't understand why we would want to decentralize the Federal Emergency Management Agency, an agency that is needed more now than it was needed when it was first created, as natural disasters continue to happen more often than ever before in places it's never happened before. But nonetheless, if she were here, but she's not, I'll ask her chair. Secretary Noem, I recently stood with local elected leaders from the city of New Orleans and our mayor-elect, Helena Moreno, as they urged DHS agents to commit to transparency, due process protections, identifiable federal agents, safeguards against discriminatory enforcement, and humanitarian protections. I would ask her if she were here, but she isn't. Ma'am, will you commit your department to uphold these values during the current operation in Louisiana? Apparently they aren't doing that, but because I know both of you are capable of answering this question and are in fact civil servants that have done your career, that you transparency, that you do understand the Constitution. So I'll ask you the question, do you think this request from our mayor-elect in New Orleans is a reasonable one? Is it reasonable to ask that agents commit to transparency, due process protections, identifiable agents, and safeguards against ask the question, what does a migrant look like? Do you know what, sir? Yes. Can you define? What a migrant looks like? What a migrant looks like?
I cannot.
Thank you. Can you tell me what you think a migrant?
I cannot.
Thank you. Can you tell me what you think a migrant looks like?
These are targeted raids.
Can you tell me what they look like?
Yeah, you have to stop them. You have to check their identification.
Okay, but can you tell me if you were describing to me as a new $50,000 bonused ICE agent? What does a migrant look like?
you would stop and you would ask them for ID, and you'd be on an intelligence-driven operation, which is what these ICE raids are. They're intelligence.
But if you were to say a guy's wearing a red shirt, you would say the guy's wearing a red shirt and a purple baseball hat.
No one.
You would be able to give that description. But can you give a description of what a migrant looks like? Can you give a description of what a migrant looks like?
We need to deploy ICE officers to stop people and ask them, and they go on intelligence.
I reclaim my time. You clearly don't want to answer my question, and that's unfortunate because the American people want to know these answers. We want to know. I've got a quick video I want to show before my time runs. Please.
Look at this. This is a stunning video from Louisiana. You hear that woman cry out. She's a 23-year-old running down the street away from the masked agents who are chasing her, repeating that she is a U.S.-born citizen, saying,
Stop. This is a United States citizen who's running away from ICE agents who, when she gets to her house and her husband comes out, they stop the chase. They clearly weren't chasing her for that. They appear to have been doing something nefarious. You know why we can't tell the difference? Because they wear masks and they don't identify themselves as agents. That's a problem, Mr.
Gentleman's time's expired. I recognize the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Van Epps, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the Secretary and gentlemen. Thank you for being here today at this critical hearing. I'm honored to be here at my very first hearing as the newest member of Congress. And I've had the privilege to serve this country for over 20 years in uniform, first as an active duty U.S. Army helicopter pilot with service with the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, and currently serving in the Tennessee Army National Guard. And I'm honored to continue the mission from a new post with this distinguished committee. To our witnesses today, allow me to begin by expressing my appreciation for the work you all do, for the work your teams do, the work that President Trump and this administration does to ensure the safety and security of our great nation. I have just a couple of questions focused on emerging AI-enabled threats. Adversaries are already using AI to identify exploitable vulnerabilities within systems and networks and generate cyber intrusion plans far faster than traditional cyber tools. Mr. Glasheen, sir, foreign cyber actors are increasingly using AI to refine malware, automate phishing, and sift large volumes of stolen data. What additional cooperation or coordination between the FBI, DHS, and companies within the private sector would most improve early detection of AI-enabled intrusions? Or if you would just like to comment on this matter generally.
No, I appreciate that opportunity. AI is a continued challenge right now. I think the relationships we have right now with government, private industry are strong right now with respect to any type of malware, ransomware. I think the CISA 2015 authorization that gives us the authorities, that's critical for the future success of that. And I think for the ongoing partnerships, I mean, the key piece here is that relationship with private sector, private industry. So we just continue to reinforce that.
Thank you, sir. That from...
No, AI is something we're closely monitoring. I mean, the ability for terrorists to breach language barriers and also to inspire people to conduct attacks and then give them AI-specific instructions, something we're monitoring carefully and very concerned about.
Thank you, sir. Thank you both. I know you both spent your entire careers defending this country and greatly appreciate that, your service and sacrifice. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Will the gentleman yield? Mr. Van Epps, can I have your time?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Kent, I want to talk to you a little bit about what we just had with Mr. Carter. I want to let you finish the answer about what...
Infiltrate easily while they communicate into an inspirational methodology where you have key members putting out media and putting out how-to guides to reach out and to touch individuals inside the United States. We recently disrupted one of those attacks just before Halloween, thanks to the work of the FBI with support from really the entire U.S. intelligence community and the Joint Terrorism Task Force model in Michigan. That plot touched multiple states and had ties to ISIS inside Iraq and Syria. Another issue that we are addressing right now, thanks to the decisive leadership of President Trump, is the scourge of fentanyl, gang, and cartel violence. Under President Trump's leadership, we've designated these cartels and gangs as terrorist organizations, and we've done that rightfully so. These individuals, these terrorists, have killed hundreds of thousands of Americans, as these angel families will tell you firsthand. What President Trump has done by designating them as terrorists has allowed us to turn the tools of the intelligence community against them and predominantly watch list them as terrorists to prevent them from ever coming into America in the first place. To date, we've added about 35,000 of these narco-terrorists to our terrorist watch list, and we've stopped just around 6,000 of these terrorists from ever entering our country, from setting foot inside of America so they can no longer kill Americans with impunity. These are just some of the issues that we're covering 24/7, 365 at the National Counterterrorism. I look forward to discussing more with you all today.
5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Good morning, Chairman Garbarino, Ranking Member Thompson, and members of the committee. I am Operations Chief of the FBI's National Security Divisions. I am honored to be here with you, representing the people of the United States, the FBI, who tackle the complex and grave threats we face with perseverance, professionalism, and integrity. Our nation faces serious and evolving threats ranging from international terrorist operatives, from sophisticated cyber attacks to internet-facilitated sexual exploitation of children, from violent gangs and criminal organizations to public corruption and corporate fraud. Keeping pace with these threats is a significant challenge. Our adversaries take advantage of the internet, social media, and emerging technologies like artificial intelligence to influence the American people, facilitate illegal activities, and recruit followers. Even as 2026 marks the 25th a persistent but evolving threat, over the past several years, the FBI has identified a particularly concerning uptick in the radicalization of young people. Terrorist most often occurs online. Social media and accessibility of the violent extremist content pose one of the greatest, most immediate threats to the homeland. Some international terrorists and people local to violence, primarily inside the United States, who are not receiving individualized direction from foreign terrorist organizations or FTOs, but are inspired to commit violence by FTOs such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Iran continues to plot attacks against former government officials in retaliation for the January 2020 death of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, Commander Qasem Soleimani. Iran also continues to provide support to its proxies and terrorist organizations throughout the world, such as Lebanese Hezbollah. Russia, Iran,